Welcome to Walk With Me. We stand together at the edge of disappearing paths once again, where magical mystery steps in and something deeper begins to speak. This is not a podcast. These are conversations and field notes from places few dare to explore. How to hold life, death, and the wild wisdom of grief, love, and fierce compassion. Here, we tend what others turn away from. We know the way forward is through, and every new trail is made by walking. Come, let your beautiful grief fuel your life's revolution.
Oh boy, I think this one is going to be a big piece, and I usually really process things a lot more than right now before I share anything. And at the same time, I think that the work that I've been doing behind the scene of really deepen the understanding of how I personally function, what is supportive for me, and to really find the root cause of certain things that kept on happening in my life, like patterns and stuff that kept on happening in my life, and as well as unmasking in places or in times that I didn't even know I was masking. It was just a learned behaviors or learned, I don't want to say facade, but like learned mask basically to really function normally in this world. And some of you are new here and some of you have been with me for a long time, and it actually might be kind of a shock that I share this with you right now. But at the same time, I really feel like it's part of my journey. It's also part of the reason why I decided to share my experience and to have people walk with me literally in my life, whether it was, as an naturopath, a biologist, somebody that lives abroad, my experience in Europe, all of these things. And the reason why I also started the Substack and to really change the way that I was sharing my voice and really connecting with all of you in a more intimate and deeper level, and yet still being present on social media for different things, and mainly because I think that there's a lot of plus size social media, but at the same time I feel like the more conventional social media places or channels have become very disconnected and very, it's not what it was anyways. So going back to what I want to share here with you, I have been, I shared this like in the past, but I have been at several points in time in my life diagnosed with either adaptation trouble or depression or anxiety. I had a time in my life where, after my mom passed away, after I had my car accident, I was in a lot of physical pain and a lot of emotional pain and a lot of psychological pain. I could have, 4, 5, 6 panic attacks in a day. And, that was a good day, basically. Like a normal day was like 4, 5, 6, when it wasn't like a constant from when I got up in the morning until when I went to sleep. I've had a lot of medication that was prescribed to me, and I was overlooked by the medical system for a long time. I even had and I'm not the kind of person that actually goes to see several doctors or goes to different pharmacies, which was kind of a shock, years ago, when the same doctor that prescribed all the medication that I was taking, and when I say all the medication, it was a lot of medication, and I was getting all those medication at the same pharmacy, and it wasn't working for me at all. And I was telling my doctor, I don't understand, I'm not improving, it's not working, I'm having all these symptoms, and he kept on telling me like, oh, you have to give it time, you have to give it time. And I had like all these symptoms, like consistent symptoms, no improvement or whatever, like for over a year, until one day my pharmacy was like, I didn't have a good service at the pharmacy, and my husband told me, why don't you just go to my pharmacy? I have like great service there and everything. And one day I got really pissed off at the pharmacy where I was going, and I just switched pharmacy, and I brought all my like pill boxes and left them there, and I said, oh, just call me when it's ready. And I walked out, and I wasn't even like, at that time we had this scuba diving shop, and the pharmacy and the scuba diving shop were like, I don't know, 250 meters from each, like from one another. Like it wasn't even a 5-minute walk. And I was walking from the pharmacy to the scuba diving shop that you had back then. And I remember that I got a call, and it was the pharmacist that was, calling me to let me know that there was 3 of my many pills that were known to have interaction with each other. So all these 3 pills were actually a cocktail that was known to have pretty big side effects when they were combined together. And I said, okay, well, what are those side effects? Like what's the list that is, and then she started to list like all the possible side effect interactions, and every single one of those side effects, I was ticking the boxes. Like it was all these side effects that I kept on telling my doctor back then. And I was just shocked. I was shocked that for over a year, I was voicing my concerns to my doctor. I was shocked that for over a year, that previous pharmacy was refilling these medication without even telling me anything. Like I felt very let down by the medical system. And it kind of like really started my whole journey towards and I'm a biologist also, like as a like I have a bachelor's in biology and I have a master's in biology, like knowing what, like learning more stuff about the medical system. My first job was actually my first job when I was like 17, 18 years old was a technician in a pharmacy. And so I knew like a lot of things about which medication was doing what and everything. And some of the medication that I actually was taking later on, it was newer medication. And also like back then, I didn't know all the interaction necessarily, because it was just, actually, it's the job of the pharmacist to bring those things to people's attention. So it really changed like the course of how I approached my health. I'm not against medication at all, but like I'm really, since then I've become a lot more attentive and use medication with discernment. And when I went into naturopathy, it was really leading with that as well, to expand what we know about the different types of ways to support our bodies, whether it's by supplementing and using herbs to support. And I just love herbs because, as opposed to medication, which are really one molecule, when you're using plants, for example, you have the whole array of molecules that are working together and not just one. So medication is actually like usually more potent as plants, like aspirin. When you take an aspirin, is actually like really the concentrated molecule. It's not concentrated now. It's actually produced in labs, but it comes from a plant, and it comes from the nature. Nature is always there to support us. We just got really good at creating things that are concentrated. And so anyways, when I actually started to do naturopathy and to have all these trainings on plants and herbs, and to really help people through like understanding their, even women like that didn't even know anything about their, even if they had kids, they didn't really know about their menstrual cycles, for example, all the hormones, what they were doing like everywhere. And I really like slowly started to learn for myself how to support myself better, but also like through the sharing of that, I've also expanded in helping other women. And I had really put in place so many different modalities, whether it was like with movement, eccentrics being one of the different modalities that I use, whether it was like different types of meditation. And when I say like different types of meditations, like I'm talking about like over 100 types of meditations that are not necessarily like, they're not necessarily well known, they're used in a different way. So it's really like having this big cabinets of tools that would help me in different ways in my life, and that's why I actually like really look at when people are developing methods to help people. I think it actually like it's putting people in a box and on the way to somewhere. But it doesn't really talk to the granularity of what we need to support ourselves and how do we evolve. And that's why a lot of my work is like walking with me and walking with you. So as things unfold, we adjust and align and course correct. And our bodies are really, our bodies, brains, life is meant to like kind of adapt. So when we have a sign of symptom and we are taking something for the sign and symptom, or we're using a modality, for example, sometimes that modality over time doesn't work as efficiently because your brain is always like changing. It's meant to adapt over what you actually like are trying to fix until you fix the root, or until you find the root cause of what is actually happening right now. So going back to my initial point, I have been all my life having challenges when it comes to anxiety and depression. And I was always diagnosed with depression and anxiety. And one of the really interesting thing that I find here in Europe is we're much closer to like what it means to be grieving, as opposed to like diagnosis of a depression, for example. Like, what are these different changes that our bodies or our minds are moving through when we're actually moving through grief, that are like physical, like your body and your mind. There are structures they're really changing. And these structures can actually be permanent. They can last a long time. It might never revert back to the original state that you had before. So all my life I was actually like going to the doctor, and even if I was asking a lot of questions and I couldn't quite see what the pattern was, and I kept on like trying to look at what was the common denominator between all these events in my life. And when we moved to Germany, shortly after we moved to Germany, a friend of mine who was going through a really, really hard time, she was already 70 plus years old, had like a lot of different things happening to her in the year before, like big life altering changes. And she actually like really collapsed and fell apart and went into depression and to psychotherapy and the whole 9 yards. And I remember she was asking me, she's super direct, and she asked me, you had like several events like this in your life. Like, how can you allow that to happen again? Like, it was something that I could have prevented, like, and I actually sat down and I thought that the question was really interesting. And I said, well, all different events were linked to seemingly circumstances that did not necessarily have a golden thread. But and that was the end of the answer that I gave her. But it really stayed with me. It really, really stayed with me. And about, I'm going to say 3 years ago, 2.5, 3 years ago, I was in a conference on, mental health. And it was an online conference, and there was different presenters or people that were speaking on mental health. And one of the person that I heard was Dr. Rabia Subani, who I invited later on the podcast. And what she was explaining was that neurodivergence, so we have a big pool of different types of brain, and we have brains that are behaving in a neurotypical manner, and we have brains that are neurodiverging from that neurotypical way of functioning. And she was explaining, because she's actually specifically for autism, she's an assessor for autism specifically. And she was explaining in her presentation that there's, in neurodivergence, there is what we call innate neurodivergence and what we call acquired neurodivergence. And what she was giving as an answer, as an explanation, was, ADHD, autism, like a whole bunch of neurodivergence were innate. So to try and see in or speak in a way that was not neuroaffirming, like I have autism, is not neuroaffirming. I am autistic, because it's actually something that you are. It is innate. You were born like this. And then there was the other part, which was acquired, which was like everything that has to do with trauma. So PTSD, CPTSD, depression, anxiety, like all of these types of neurodivergences that were acquired, that technically could go back to, after therapy and different types of modality, go back to a neurotypical, theoretically a neurotypical brain, because it was acquired. People were not born like that. And I remember I stopped in my track, and it kind of shocked me, because I was like, oh my God, like I didn't even know that. Like I've always known that my brain works very differently than the average person. And it is, it's been something that I've been aware of, but I never stopped to think that my experience of different types of trauma, exposure to traumatic deaths, for example, or sexual violence, or anything that has to do with trauma, could actually have an impact on the structure of my brain, right? And we're talking about mental health. Mental health is actually like a really newer way of looking at. It's a pretty new discipline when you look at it, and also like the connection between the mind and the body is really really, really new. Even if there's all these buzzwords everywhere. It's fairly new, and most doctors are still operating on like the different body parts paradigm, instead of like looking at the person in its whole. And that was one of the things that I really started to advocate after my own experiences, to really look at the body in a more holistic manner, right? So so that whole conversation, the whole conference on those two types of neurodivergences, like those two bigger groups, and the overlapping sometimes of the two, right, was really I was flabbergasted, and I invited Rabia on the podcast, and this is a beautiful podcast on. We spoke about our work, we talked about our work on neurodivergent assessment, and we also talked a lot because she's a Sufist, so we talked a lot about that as well. And the podcast episode itself is I think it's 75 minutes or so, and we'd stay together for at least another hour and a half after the podcast recording, and we really talked about a whole bunch of stuff, and I really started to see that there might be more to my brain that I have understood until then, and also that it might be time for me to explore what it meant, and how it was impacting my life on a daily, day-to-day basis, obviously, but also in medium and long term, especially since I have had a flare of a whole bunch of different symptoms and signs after we came to Germany, because the challenge and the fact that I didn't have my foundation, right? I moved to a new country, it's a new, you have to rebuild your community. But there's the visible, obvious foundation that you have, right? But there's also all these invisible things that I had put in place over decades before that I didn't even know were there to support me, that were not there anymore. And so we talked a lot about different things, and she said you might want to look into that, because clearly you're showing signs. And I still wouldn't believe it, or I still wasn't identifying, I'm gonna say, with even the possibility that I could have neurodivergence that was innate, that I was born with. In my mind, I was still in the process of integrating the information that I had a lot of events in my life that influenced or caused, or might have caused, neurodivergence in an acquired way. But I really didn't even feel like it was, I'm going to say, to even think about the fact that I could even wear the, I don't like labels, but that I could be neurodivergent altogether. And so much so that when I actually published the podcast episode, I named it Neurodiverse Perspective, blah, 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 blah. And I remember when I published it and I sent all the information to Rabia, she emailed me back and she said, that neurodiverse is the whole universe of neurotypical and neurodivergent people. It includes all the different types of all the different neurotypes, whereas neurodivergent is really the people that are diverging from the neurotypical. And I said, yeah, I understand that. And I didn't get the message, because she was clearly saying you're calling the episode a neurodiverse perspective, when clearly we were both neurodivergent people talking to each other. There was no neurodiversity in the sense that it wasn't we were both neurodivergent. And even if under the umbrella of neurodivergent, there's a lot of different types, it's still outside of the neurotypical. And I will come back in another time to talk more about this. So I started to really think about this and observe some stuff in my day-to-day life, and also look at patterns throughout, my life in different, like at work and school and at home and all kind of stuff. And after Nanook passed away last year, it really sent me back into a place where I was deeply grieving on top of everything else that had accumulated since we moved to Germany. And I took the year to really take care of my health. I was at that point where my hip was not functioning anymore. I couldn't even lift my leg. My right leg was not, I couldn't lift it. Like I had to lift it with my hands. I had a lot of pain, physical pain. And last year after she passed away, I really took time to change or refocus really specifically on my health, and especially like the mind body connection, and especially everything that has to do with psychosomatic work, how different events really imprint on your body. And I started to look for a place that would do assessment for neurodivergence. And originally I was looking for a clinic that would do autistic assessment. But I mean, here in Germany, like even the wait list to get assessment, whether it's for ADHD or autism, they're so long that they're closed. And the other thing is, like in the public system, right? And the other thing is that the chance that I would have anyways an assessor that speaks English, that I would do the assessment in English, was even small. And honestly, I couldn't even fathom doing this whole process in German, like not at all. So I started to look for clinics. I've called like dozens of different clinics, left messages, sent emails. Like I really tried to find a place in the public system. Couldn't find a place. And I finally found a clinic that is actually specialized. It's a private clinic, so they specialize and they do offer in English the assessment. And at the time, you can actually do, like when I approached them in the fall, they were doing ADHD assessments, but not yet autistic assessments, like autism assessments. And I said, well, I want to be tested for both. And I'm not going to explain here, like, or go into details for now why I wanted to do both. But I said I would love to start with autism rather than ADHD. But I couldn't find any place that would do that in English. So I said, okay, I want to do both. And I'll start with the ADHD. And I signed up at the beginning of this year in January, and I went through the process. So it's a fairly long process. It took like a 3-month period of time to go through the process, all the pre-assessments, I've answered like hundreds of questions. And I've also asked my dad to there's one of the assessment that is actually like on your behaviors and your development before the age of 12. So I thought that having my dad's input would be really interesting as well. So he helped me with that. And I went through the process and I got my report around 2 weeks ago. And last week I had my my appointment to discuss the report with the assessor that I had. And then on Monday this week, I had my appointment with the person that could actually sign up and approve the official diagnosis. And I have, since this week, an official diagnosis of ADHD combined type. And it's not so much about the diagnosis as much as the understanding of my entire life through that lens, and my understanding of how much we still are in very stereotype of what ADHD looks like. Like we all have like the stereotype of the 8-year-old hyperactive boy. But we know that when it comes to women and non-gender, it really is expressing itself in a different way. And we also develop very different coping mechanism behaviors, including masking, to overcome and to actually like live normal lives as much as we can at a cost. And what is happening right now is that I'm understanding that my adaptation trouble, depression, and burnout that I've had in my life, I've had 3 major events that were like really major that stopped me like for several months, where I went down like a deep down well. But all through my life I've been really having challenges with my health. And it was the underlying cause was like, we kept on in the major events, we kept on focusing on fixing the depression or the anxiety with pills or whatever, and we were not addressing or understanding the diagnosis or the signs and symptoms from a root cause, which was ADHD. And my diagnosis was specifically for ADHD. There's signs that I might have also autism on a lower grade, but ADHD, just ADHD in itself, explains so much. And this morning I was having like a really hard morning. It was and it also is influenced by our menstrual cycle, which I'm gonna come back to at another time. But all of this morning I was actually having a harder time, I'm gonna say. And I'm just looking at all of this, not just like understanding my life, but also like through every single modality that I have learned and applied to myself and become certified in, every single supplement, plant, or whatever, like every single thing that worked for me, because I was really focused on helping myself with, depression, anxiety, or grief specifically, was working because there was a common golden thread with what happens in our brain and how these modalities also help with ADHD. And this has been a really life-changing moment. It still is. I am still like, I've known for several weeks now, or I've actually known for several weeks that it was going towards that. And also the official diagnosis I got on Monday, and I'm integrating that. I'm processing that. It comes with a whole bunch of different mixed emotions, from like the whole scale of emotion it comes with. And it also is arriving at a time where, like several weeks ago, I got my German citizenship, which also came with a wide range of different emotions for what it means. And 2 days ago, my husband asked me, what are you most happy about at this moment? To have gotten your German citizenship or your ADHD diagnosis? And I actually said the ADHD diagnosis. And he was like, really? And I said, yes. I'm super excited for the German citizenship. That's actually like really like fireworks, and it's really, really cool thing, because it relieved a lot of the anxiety that we all feel at expats or immigrants when we don't really have a status, especially with everything that's happening in the world right now, where like there's countries that are taking away citizenships crying out loud. So to have this dual citizenship, this new German citizenship that is added to obviously my Canadian one, it really lowered a lot of the anxiety or the uncomfortable discomfort that I've had as a foreigner, because it kind of confirms that I belong here. And also it actually like really opens the door to the next steps, the other project that we have, like the other dreams that we're building towards. It's really, really cool. It's really, the citizenship it's really about the future, right? Like, and it's a really cool thing to have. My ADHD diagnosis is life-changing in a sense that it actually really flips the perspective or the lens on my entire life, bringing a lot more compassion and acceptance for times in my life where I might not, or I was definitely not kind to myself at all. And also I was on the other end of really not kind, and not understanding people around me that were calling themselves friends, that were, not willing, I guess, to give me the benefit of the doubt, to really like go into the understanding. And we all have our own way of looking at life through our lens, and there's nothing like lived experience to broaden our understanding or to deepen our understanding of what people might go through. But it really, like, the diagnosis really changed the way that I look at my life in the past. So it's about the past, but it's also about the present and the future. How can I support myself better? What really works? It's like, what is the best way to go about this? And it's also all the other times I was running an uphill battle for something that was supposed to have an end. I was supposed to be fixed. I was supposed to like get over this, and move on to something else basically, but it wasn't happening. And this is where I say it comes with a whole bunch of emotion, because now I know that it comes with grief, because I know that that is the way that my brain functions. It's a neurodevelopmental, what we call disorder. I prefer the World Health Organization that categorizes under a kinetic disorder, but it actually is something that is part of who I am, and that will bring even more deeper understanding of how I function, and also a lot more compassion and kindness towards myself, and a lot more acceptance towards myself. And I think that in itself is life-changing. And for the future, how we build things. And I've already been doing so much already, before I even knew that my brain was different. However, now I know that the root cause of all the signs and symptoms that I have been challenged with or navigating comes from that. And that is in and of itself, it's a blessing. And that's why I told my husband the diagnosis for ADHD. So that's what I had to share with you this week. I am sending you so much love. The tone of the podcast is going towards that. It's going to expand more about, my own trainings, how I see the world, my day-to-day things with this diagnosis and why, how linking together, and also my beautiful experience in Europe. So stay tuned. If you're not on Substack yet, join me on Substack. It's going to get very intimate. I'm going to Montreal in about 2 weeks, and I'm going to be sharing more about that, like how, closing cycles, how I'm going to just to visit. And I'm going to share a bit more about that. I am sending you so much love, and thank you for listening, and thank you for supporting the podcast. Share this with somebody that actually that you know that might benefit, that would actually really help support me for the podcast. But also it's life-changing to have these conversations and to hear these perspectives, because I wish I had that before, like it would have changed my life. And this conversation might really be a good nudge in more acceptance, compassion, and maybe light bulb moment for somebody else. Okay, bye.
Thank you for walking with me today. Through all of life's seasons, may we always remember that we hold the courage, the intuition, and the wisdom to navigate our own path and to let change, grief, loss, and love guide us. If this conversation spoke to you, subscribe, leave a heartfelt review, and share it with someone who would benefit from it. Also join me on Substack for deeper reflections and resources. You'll find a link in the show notes. Until next time, keep exploring, embracing change, and allowing your beautiful grief to fuel your next life's revolution. Love, me.